Monday morning. Welcome into the Inquirer podcast. A little later than normal, but we got a few beers, got some wings in us. We got a little caffeinated this morning. We're feeling a little bit better. It's Jeremy Werner, Derek Piper, live from the Hyatt Place, Iowa City, where Illinois last night here in Iowa City defeats the Hawkeyes 73-61. As the title of this podcast says, Derek, they burst Iowa's bubble. It's an interesting environment in that a lot of Iowa fans are up in Minneapolis with the Big Ten tournament for the women's side, Caitlin Clark and Iowa Hawkeyes claiming that title. Students were on spring break, but the crowd never really got into it until about midway through the second half because Illinois took a 22-4 lead to start that game. Almost blew the lead, but Iowa got within 4 points midway through the half. But Illinois really closed with some strong defense, I thought, late in the game. But Illinois gets a huge quad one victory and spoils Iowa's parade with all of this. So just kind of an interesting game back and forth there, Derek, with a huge lead early, almost blowing it. Iowa missed some open shots, but certainly a good win that Illinois feels good about.
No doubt. Yeah, it was kind of a wacky game and one that Illinois really in control from the get-go. And Iowa, you heard about the sellout. I know that they've had crowds that have been less than desirable this year, especially as Caitlin Clark company have really drawn the main stage for them during basketball season. But it was the gold out senior night sellout, but there was definitely some lacking energy there in the building. But to Illinois' credit, they didn't allow Iowa's crowd to get in the game early because of that early run. I thought a lot of it was Iowa missing shots that they normally make. And there was a little bit of that regression that went as far as opponents, because I know that coming in, I think over the last month prior to that game, opponents were shooting like 45% from three against Illinois. And just like Minnesota, when they were just unconscious, and Wisconsin had made some shots. Purdue in the second half, of course, 8 of 10 from three. So you're kind of due for a team to have an off night, maybe even when you're not in the best position. I know we'll talk about that a little bit more defensively. But to Illinois' credit, I do think that they deserve to be recognized for limiting Iowa to one shot, a lot of possessions. I think Iowa only had like 3 offensive rebounds the entire game. You look at the previous matchup in Champaign, they had like 15 second chance points. That's really not what they do. So, but that is kind of pinpointing a weakness there in Illinois' defense that they didn't show in this one. So I like that. I didn't like the way they closed the half. I mean, they had a stretch there where just a rash of turnovers, 6 turnovers in a 10 possession span, and really allowed Iowa to climb back into it. Then in the second half, cut it to 4. Josh Dix is a really good player. He got it going. And but fortunately, Tony Perkins had a rough night. Sanford was missing shots that were pretty clean looks on the whole. But I do think the Illinois defense, which is the storyline, hey, holding a team in the 60s, like old school Big Ten basketball. But a squad like that can really score it. I thought Illinois getting stops down the stretch was huge. And that was a defense that clamped down. It wasn't just, hey, Iowa was missing wide open looks and bunnies. Like they really were able to hold it together really better than we've seen for a while, I think.
Yeah, looking at this, Derek, you held Iowa to its worst offensive efficiency of the season. Like, yes, some of that was them missing open shots, but what I would buy into, like if we're going to buy into a better defensive performance, it was the half court, right? They did really well in the half court. The transition defense was atrocious. Iowa outscored you 21-12 in transition. And that's despite Shannon being phenomenal in transition. Just open threes, not finding people, not communicating. Illinois got lucky that Iowa only had 21 fast break points. But in the half court, Terrence Shannon was dominant on Tony Perkins. He made me immediately regret my All Big Ten third team picking Tony Perkins as my last vote over Khalil Ware, because Khalil Ware was phenomenal and had a great month. And I kind of regret that one after last night. But Shannon, I mean, Perkins is an Illini killer. He's a proven. The last time they were in this building, 32 points, just hitting all those mid-range shots. He was never comfortable the entire game. And you mentioned it, rebounds, 40 defensive rebounds to 3 Iowa offensive rebounds. This team needs to dominate the glass like that, because one, that makes them really good defensively. You limit second chance opportunities, which killed you against Purdue. 2, it gets you in transition, right? And where Terrence Shannon is just absolutely dominant. So that's what I can buy into is when this team rebounds like that, when Quincy Guerrier rebounds like that, Coleman Hawkins with 10 boards in just 25 minutes, this team is going to be really, really dangerous because you limit the other team and then you get going to what your bread and butter is offensively in transition.
For sure. Yeah, I'd throw Ty Rodgers in there too. Good on the glass. I think he had 7 or 8 rebounds. But yeah, I mean, seeing the Quincy Guerrier that we grown to know in January. I mean, a double-double guy on a regular basis. And for him just to have that motor and that tenacity on the glass was huge. And he's played with increased confidence and aggressiveness offensively too, of course. But yes, being able to run, getting Shannon in the open court. I mean, we've talked about it all season long, but it's just – you can't stop him when he has open space, and he's so hard to not just foul, like not to get in his way and foul him. I mean, his and one was ridiculous when he kind of gathered and I don't know if it was a Euro, but threw contact and put it in. And but yeah, on the other side, Iowa probably should have had 30, maybe even 40 fast break points. Like they're the best transition offense in the country by the metrics, and they had 21 field goal attempts in transition. They only made 7 of them. So, again, like I do, though, fully buy into the half court. I mean, Tony Perkins is a tough cover, and we've talked a lot about Illinois trying to go up against talented guards and what they've done against the Illini over the course of the season. But that's why I know that we were discussing your all Big Ten ballot. Like, I mean, that's why Terrence Shannon's on the all defensive team. It needs to be named as an all league defender because I mean what he's done over the last pushing a month, really outside of maybe the first 2.5 weeks when he first came back, he's been a high impact defender that really has been able to shut some people down. So that was good. And other than Dick's making some shots that as far as half court goes, that you just give him credit. I thought the interior defense is pretty good too. I mean, Dainja did not let Owen Freeman, who probably good chance going to be the freshman of the year in the Big Ten. Danger kind of punked him. I thought that, not holding his ground, not letting him get inside. And Cricky didn't have the game that he had in Champaign too. So on the whole, a much better defensive effort. And this is kind of what Brad has been trying to push his team to. And what Brad's identity has been throughout his tenure at Illinois is like, we're not going to have, when we don't have our A game offensively, we still got to be able to win and go on the road, knowing the stakes for Iowa, and to hold that offense to 61 points is all in that, stepping into that direction, which is key as they go into postseason play.
Yeah, I didn't even think about Cricky, man. 2 points, 1 rebound that entire game. Like, front court was great. Coleman, I thought actually played pretty well, but there was a 10-minute stretch there where he didn't have to play in the second half in a key stretch of Illinois expanding its lead in the second half because Dane Danger was so good. Quincy Guerrier was phenomenal last night. His first double-double, Derek, since the Northwestern game that went to overtime on January 24th. Remember, that was a stretch of 6 double-doubles in 8 games. It's like, it's Guerrier, an all Big Ten performer. But during a 10-game stretch after that, Derek, he averaged 7.2 points and 4 rebounds. Just didn't have a bite to him, didn't have an edge. But last night, you saw it, man. He's been tougher on the glass here of late, the last couple games. 15 rebounds between the last 2 games. And then, obviously, he's been scoring in double digits. He's been much more aggressive, taking to the hoop, taking open shots. He's on a real heater from 3, 8 of his last 12. But really, he's been shooting well. He just hasn't been shooting enough or been on the court to score enough. But 30 minutes is the most for him in the last 12 games. They need this guy. They need this version of Quincy Guerrier. And it's a very positive sign for this team that he's playing well because their margin for error goes up. If Terrence Shannon has a bad game like he did against Purdue, you still have a chance because you got Domask and Hawkins and Guerrier playing well. If Domask does not play very well like he did in the first 30 minutes of last night, Guerrier can help you with Terrence Shannon, with Dane Danger. That's where that depth comes in. And boy, he's just a huge X factor for this team in this upcoming postseason.
Probably the biggest X factor when you think about what his potential is, and then that the consistency has been there for the big 3 between Shannon, Domask, and Hawkins. And yeah, you're going to mix in an off night for one of those guys throughout the course of a season, and depending on the matchup and as teams try to take certain things away from those 3. I mean, but Quincy, if he can pop up and get on the glass and have the aggressiveness offensively, he's a guy that gets to the free throw line. I know he doesn't shoot the best percentage at the line, but I like his straight line drive. I like his shot fake and being able to attack the paint. I think sometimes Illinois lacks that, like in terms of just downhill aggressiveness and assertiveness. So in the 3-ball, being able to go like that. I mean, he made some tough ones against Purdue, and then last night was able to vary a couple as well. So I mean, this is a guy that's played 5 years of high major basketball. He's gone to the tournament before. He's made a little bit of a run there, and it's just seemed like for whatever reason, hasn't had the same bite, intensity, and just engagement overall. And I think he's got to make Brad just not take him off the court. That's kind of what he's got to be able to play at a level where he can't do that, and has to be in those late game lineups. And last night was that was the case last night. So that was good to see.
Good point. He's got to make Brad do that. After last night, Brad needs to do that, right? Like Quincy needs to be a part of that with the way he's playing. How about Dane Danger, man? Like, we can speculate about his future, his role on this team. He's finding a role, and Brad he's again, like you said, making Brad find a role for him. And the reason he's doing it is not his scoring, it's not his offense, it's his defensive presence, it's his presence on the glass, and then adding to it is making those shots. And it's usually just put back opportunities. It's not a lot of these post ups, because Dainja can be turnover prone in some of those and miss some shots. It's the effort, it's the intensity in that post, and he stonewalled Owen Freeman in that second half. Freeman had 8 first half points, 0 in the second half. It was monstrous. Forced that travel where Freeman wanted nothing to do with Danger and how strong he was there. And they got some easy buckets around the rim to really boost Illinois and extend that lead along with Marcus Domask. So he was on the court from about the 12-minute mark to the 4-minute mark, and really helped Illinois square away this victory. So we've seen this over the last month, I think, Derek, where we talked with Danger last night, and I think he just said, like, if I play defense, I'm going to play. And it might be 10 minutes, 12 minutes a game, but those can be really valuable minutes to help complement Coleman Hawkins, give Coleman a little bit of a rest. And if Coleman doesn't have it that night offensively or defensively, you got another guy you can turn to.
No doubt. Yeah, plus 10 on the court last night. And I was pulling the stats of the last 5 games. He's been plus 13 in 65 minutes. So, averaging around there, I think 13, 14 minutes a game, if you do the math correctly. And but he's given you some point production for sure, rebounding, and some toughness and grit in the paint defensively. And I know that we've talked a lot about throughout his time at Illinois, excuse the air conditioner or whatever is about to go in the background on me, but being kind of a liability in the drop coverage and just what he can do at that end of the floor. But I think that recently he's probably been better in drop than Coleman has. Coleman's had his struggles there, and he's been blocking shots. I think his activity is heightened defensively, and it's just great to see him kind of have that wake up call at the right time. And it reminds me a little bit. I know RJ was playing well down the stretch last year after a really tough year, and I know people are going to put the pieces together and say RJ ended up transferring, and Dain might end up doing it as well. But I think that it's so key as you look at matchups that you could have in the tournament, whether it's Coleman getting in foul trouble or whether it's teams that have a lot of size and bigs. I want to kind of over the next week dive in a little bit more on the teams that Illinois could play and what those look like. But Clemson's a team that loves the post and PJ Hall and whatnot. You could use him in a game like that. You could use him against the UConn with Klingon and whatnot. But just to have him playing this well, it gives you some more depth. It gives you some more lineup flexibility. And credit to him for kind of staying the course and not just completely going off the rails and wasn't getting minutes and getting the role that he expected.
Yeah, no pouting, right? And you just haven't heard about that on this team very much. And we'll get into the rotation here because there are some guys that are losing minutes in this rotation, guys who are gaining minutes in this rotation. But I feel like we haven't talked enough yet about Terrence Shannon. We talked about him stopping Tony Perkins. By far the best player on the court. Like, Peyton Sanford might be an NBA draft pick, which would stink for Iowa because Iowa's could be good next year if he came back. But Terrence was just dominant on both ends of the court. Didn't have to score a lot in that second half because of Danger, because of Domask. But 25 points on 19 shots, Derek. Just some huge step-back threes. And then defensively just imposed his will against Tony Perkins. Listen, I get the legal situation is going to cloud all of this. He's a no doubt all Big Ten first teamer. He should be an All-American, whether that's third, second, whatever. I don't care. He should be based on what he's doing on the court. Should be an all defensive team. And I looked at you last night and I said, I don't think there's 20 guys better in this NBA draft than Terrence Shannon. Now, age, legal situation will have a lot to do with his stock, but he's just one of the best players in the country, and he proved it again after an off game against Purdue, and just was by far the best player on the court last night.
Great response, really assertive from the get-go, understanding that Josh Dick shouldn't be able to hold you down. And, Shannon had 12 points in that first game against Iowa. Thought he settled for the jump shot a little bit too much, didn't get into the teeth of the defense. I know that getting stops and allowing you to run out is a big key to unlocking him and what he can do. I mean, that was a big part of what was lacking against Purdue as well. Without getting out in transition, which was a credit to Purdue limiting Illinois there, that you can kind of just prevent some of the opportunities where Shannon can play right into his bread and butter, what he wants to accomplish. So I think that, just the confidence of making the jump shots off the bounce, really, him and Quincy were all that was really rolling for you there. I know that you built a big lead in the first half, but even as things started to unravel, it's like Damas doesn't have it. He's struggling booty balling and getting his shot blocked. And some other guys just, Harmon was playing pretty poorly and whatnot. You just wanted to get as many possessions as possible through Terrence Shannon. So, yes, the ability to get downhill is electric. We know that. But to circle back to defense, I mean, he's an all-league defender. He should be a first-team guy. As far as the Big Ten, that's a no doubt, no-brainer. He's going to finish with the highest scoring average for any Illini in the last 50 years.
That's right.
That's insane. And yes, as far as on-court stuff, deserves to have the jersey right next to Io, right next to Kofi, and to be an All-American. So I am going to be really, really curious what that voting looks like. And of course, what comes for him in the legal process. But to have that dude going into the thick of March, that's a benefit that a lot of other teams don't have.
Yeah. Ty Rodgers, you mentioned a really strong game for him, 8 points, 7 rebounds, and he was on the floor late in the game. Got a lot of Nico Moretti in the first half, and to be honest with you, it didn't work out very well, especially with Brock Harding playing really, really well. Surprised Iowa didn't go back to him in the second half because they were struggling offensively. They were rolling with Tony Perkins, but he just didn't have it on the night. But what did you make of some of the rotation decisions in this game, Derek? Because Rodgers was on the court late, Guerrier on the court late, Luke Goody only 10 minutes. We got to see a little bit of Moretti. Justin Harmon really struggled, only 15 minutes. He had a bad week, didn't score in either of the games last week. So what'd you make of how Underwood kind of employed his roster last night?
I think the way that the game played out, the type of night that Quincy was having, the type of night that Ty was having, it made it obvious on who to go with down the stretch. And he did roll out those guys in that closing lineup, to his credit. But not that it was a terribly tough decision. Harmon was bad last night. Harmon was bad, and Goody didn't give you really anything. And that's kind of unfortunately been a trend for him recently, and needs to find it with he's kind of showed some hesitancy with his shot and needs those rebounds. Like I know he's a guy that plays hard, but got to be able to come down with loose balls. Got to be a guy that can go get you a big stop on a defensive rebound and those type of things. So until Luke plays better and picks it up, it's hard to see him deserving more than 10 minutes in a given night. So I think that it was good to see Brad go with the right guys. We'll see if it continues. I do like the fact, I know usually, sometimes you have a go-to closing lineup, like, in the closing stretch that these 5 guys are going to be on the court pretty much every time. I think that with the lineup flexibility, and you can kind of search it and play it out with matchups and feel based on, maybe Harmon's having a good night, and he's had those. It's not like he's had just a terrible season on the whole. It is interesting, though, just kind of to zero in on him, the difference in the scale of when Harmon's good, he's pretty darn good. When he's bad, he's pretty bad. So there hasn't been a lot of middle ground with him, but he's a guy that at times you want out there because he can make some big buckets, and he can be a guy that can guard on the perimeter. But I think that having the feel of who's having a night, what's the game situation call for is good. but I would like to see Quincy out there pretty much every time down the stretch, and had earned it last night. And I think he's another guy that I know there are some offensive questions, but just the rebounding and the effort is always good to have on the court in crunch time.
Yeah, my thing, like Justin Harmon, when he's good, you're really good. Like when he scores double digits, I think Illinois is 9-0. So when he's good, like he's really good. And I think he's a really important piece when we go into March with depth. And if Shannon has an off night or somebody has an off offense tonight, he can be really important. Just you'd like to see more consistency out of a senior. And Luke Goody, the last 5 games, I mean, he seems to be bothered by an injury, right? Like the lower leg injury that we've seen, but 9 points, 5 rebounds over his last 5 games. What he's supposed to give you is a sharpshooter. And if he's not shooting the ball, like when he's open or not getting open shots, he's just not giving you very much right now, whether that's due to injury or just bad matchups against bigger teams, right? He's just not giving you very much right now. So I'd rather roll with Ty Rodgers, who could initiate some offense, had 2 big layups to kind of keep Illinois' lead in that second half, gets rebounds. And I thought he was better defensively. He did get – there's still communication things with Ty Rodgers that he needs to get better at. Just some scouting report stuff he needs to get better at, but he is good on the ball, and I thought he did a pretty nice job on Josh Dix last night. He was a really good player, but 13 points on 13 shots. You'll take that. And then Quincy, man, those are more dynamic players for Illinois right now. So if Luke isn't making shots, like if you need offense, you need some shot making, I think he can really help you. But those other guys, I think, are just stealing away his minutes right now. All right, Derek, let's look ahead to the Big Ten tournament. Illinois is the number 2 seed. We should sit here and say 3 of the last 4 seasons, Illinois has won 14 Big Ten games. They still, over the last 5 seasons, have won more Big Ten games than anybody, and that includes Purdue. They have 1 more win over Purdue during the last 5 seasons. I think it's like 10 more after the next team, which I think is Wisconsin. So we always like to reflect on what that is, but a 3rd time in 4 seasons are also a top 2 seed, finish top 2 in the Big Ten, and they'll get the winner of Iowa and Ohio State, 2 teams that have played pretty well over the last couple months. I know some people don't like playing a team 3 times in 1 year. Penn State did not say that last year against Illinois. I just think if you do get Iowa, I think it's a good matchup for you. I just don't think they can stop you. Domask had an off night last night, but had some big buckets. They can't contain Terrence Shannon. You're much bigger and more physical than they are. So I'm not too concerned about that matchup. Ohio State is getting hot at the right time. I still like Illinois against either of those teams, but you got Nebraska as the 3 seed on that side. Indiana's been really hot as the 6 seed. That could be a dangerous team. But what do you think of Illinois' chances in the Big Ten tournament, Derek?
I think for the most part, the bracket, the section of the brackets you're in the bottom portion is pretty favorable. I'm not gonna say I'd be stunned, but you should obviously as a 2 seed, but just the way the path is built out, you should be playing on Sunday. That's the way I look at it. I think that going against Iowa again could be a tough game. Again, if they make the shots that they normally make, you look back to yesterday and you think about transition, we're probably having an entirely different conversation. But if they can continue to take some steps forward with their defense and clean up some of that stuff, then I agree with you. They should not be able to contain what you have offensively. Ohio State's not a very good defensive team either, but Jake Diebler has them playing well, their best basketball of the season. And they trended up at the end of the year last year, and we know they made a little bit of a run in the Big Ten tournament last season as well. Have some talented players with Thornton and Gale, and obviously Jamison Battle too. So not saying that either one of those will be a gimme game for sure. And then Nebraska, we know that's a good defensive team. It's a team that gave you all you could handle in Champaign as you kind of melted away. But I like that matchup. I think Illinois, with their size defensively, should be able to handle Tominaga better than they did in the last game. But you still got to kind of see it to believe it if this team is going to be an average or a little bit better defensive team. They actually are finally away from that 100 line on the defensive metrics on KenPom and taking some steps forward. I think that Purdue on the whole was a step in the right direction, especially in the first half defensively. Just got to limit the breakdowns. Transition is a concern. Indiana, watch out. Mike Woodson is trash talking, and he's puffing his chest out because they've won 4 games in a row and
feeling good about himself.
He's feeling good. He says he's done his job, and if his job's to be 90th in the net, then Illinois is in a good spot as far as that rivalry or whatnot. So, I think that, again, Illinois should go on a run in the Big Ten tournament. I know that isn't going to be enough to push the 3 line. I don't know. Even if you were to maybe even win the Big Ten tournament, there's always the question. We've been over this. How much does that Sunday game matter against Purdue? But I do think winning yesterday and knowing that, Ohio State or Iowa, I think on a neutral, especially Iowa, maybe even Ohio State would be a quad 1 game. I think your floor is now a 4 seed. I'd be surprised if you fall off of that based on winning yesterday. So that's good. And then I think that we should have in all likelihood, an extended stay in Minneapolis, but we've had some quick exits here recently in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, listen, anything can happen in a Big Ten tournament. Some teams are more motivated than the others. But I don't agree with any Illinois fan that sits there, and I know you and Joey talked about this, said, let's just get out of this tournament and prepare for the NCAA tournament. That's not worked well the last 2 times. I mean, Illinois should have lost 2 years ago in the first round to Chattanooga after being 1 and done at the Big Ten tournament. Last year they lost in the first game in Arkansas. I want to be playing well. I want to be playing well. I want that winning feeling. I want confidence. I want those guys making shots, playing good defense. So 3 opportunities to continue to get better potentially and test yourself and improve your resume. I mean, if you go and win 2 games, Derek, and Duke slips up or somebody else, at least have a chance at a 3 seed, which can really help you, whether it's your destination, maybe you're closer than Spokane or Salt Lake City, which would be good for the Illini fans, or you just get a better draw into the tournament. Purdue and Illinois are the 2 best teams here. I think we've seen that, but I think this matters. I think hanging banners matters, and I think the Big Ten tournament is always a great event, but it's also, the last couple of years, the Big Ten tournament champion hasn't fared well in the NCAA tournament. I think that's more a product of the Big Ten being down than anything. We've seen before, John Beilein teams get hot in the Big Ten tournament. They carry that in to the NCAA tournament. Michigan State has done that several times under Tom Izzo. So I still think this week really matters. And you want to hit the stride. And to be honest with you, Derek, I mean, Illinois won 4 or 5. And the one loss was to Purdue, where your best player didn't play very well. I feel confident going to the postseason with this team, more so than the last 2 years, I would say. Maybe that's hindsight with the 2022 team as they won the Big Ten championship, played well going into the Big Ten tournament. But that's why I think this Big Ten tournament matters. Keep those vibes up going into March. Show that you can show up for every game, even against an underdog opponent who's trying to make their way into the NCAA tournament by some miracle run. This is where I want to see it. And that's why I was so encouraged last night by Illinois. Iowa had everything to play for. It's do or die for them. And they're a 12 seed, 13 seed caliber team. And you were able to beat them on their home court and just shut them up right from the start. The crowd never got into it. That's what I want to see from Illinois moving forward. So that's why yesterday was a good sign and why I'm looking for in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, I'm writing about this, but I think trying to mesh Brad Underwood's identity of defense and toughness, rebounding, and being able to win when you're not an A-game offense with this offensive potential, which can be one of the very best in the country. If you can blend those 2, this team can go on an extended run, really, deep into the Sweet 16, Elite 8, maybe even the Final 4. And I think trying to find that before all of a sudden it's March Madness can be part of what you obtain and gain from the Big Ten tournament. I think that you can get that. Obviously, just in general, trying to get on a run here, trying to just continue to get Quincy right, build up the consistency and the resume here for Quincy to make no mistake that he's playing his best basketball at the right time. And I think this is kind of the overall theme of Illinois as they look at this is trying to hit that notch, because their upside is very high. We know that it is hard to judge at times. Well, 14 wins is a lot, and I'm not trying to take anything away from that. It's a weaker Big Ten. Yep. And I think as far as eye test goes, you did recently, play a shootout with a Minnesota team. Yes, they made some ridiculous shots, but you don't like giving up 97 there. And so there's some of that I think you're trying to leave no doubt that they've addressed things defensively. They've been able to take strides there. We know that they're a machine offensively. Even for Brad to kind of continue to rep late game stuff, I think that's another thing. More opportunities to play in late game where they know the lineups that they want to hit. They know in terms of obviously being able to get stops and know that they can do that with rebounds and whatnot. But I even think that, what are you going to run when you need a bucket? How can you get Terrence downhill when you're in the half court and teams know the ball's going to him. How do you balance that versus the mask? And I know we got it's a team that's been in a lot of basketball games. So it's not necessarily like they're green and you're trying to, turn them from boys to men. But I do think that just the more reps this team can get and trying to just make it firmly this team is playing their best at the right time can, like you said, can improve their draw, but also I think just improve the vibe on where they're going to ultimately finish out the tournament.
Yeah. I want to get to some of the questions here on our live YouTube. If you want to weigh in, you can send those questions in here very, very shortly. We'll get to all those coming up. First, let's hear from one of our great sponsors. Just give me a second. I got to get that here going. But let's go to Fedigator first. The in-transition turnovers really made this game harder and closer than it needed to be. Really sloppy at times. Yeah, Derek, that's what kept Iowa in this game. Was the turnovers. Illinois had 12. Iowa had how many points off turnovers in this one? 11. That really changed the game when they got sloppy in that first half. Where they have 6 turnovers and about 10 possessions there?
It did. Yeah, there was a 16-4 run for Iowa, and during that stretch, Illinois had 6 giveaways and 10 possessions, that's just ridiculous, really. Harmon had a couple. Shannon, it was really everybody, Shannon, Moretti, Hawkins had a really bad pass trying to skip it up the floor. And those turnovers can lead to runouts. And that's something that Iowa wants to do. They want to play fast to give them a numbers advantage as far as that goes. So, whether it was, I think it was Illinois just being sloppy with the ball. Iowa did mix in some zone and a little bit of full court press, which they do. And, but really it was just Illinois not being ball tough and not just executing. So on the whole, they've done a pretty good job of being able to take care of the ball, especially given they don't have a point guard. But there have been moments, late against Michigan State, of course, is one of those. Penn State, where they've kind of unraveled a little bit and had those turnovers that can break you at the wrong time, obviously. But that played a part of it too. But I think just the transition on the whole is matchups, getting back, communicating, making sure you're not talking to the ref too much after maybe you're trying to sell a foul call. You got to get back and you got to D up. And there was just too many open three opportunities that Iowa had that could have really burned you.
Yeah, they got to fix that. All right, let's hear from one of our great sponsors.
Eat better, especially when I'm out on the road like I am so much in March. But eating better has never been easier with Factor's delicious, ready-to-eat meals. Every fresh, never frozen meal is chef-crafted, dietitian approved, and ready to go in just 2 minutes. You'll have over 35 different options to choose from every week, including Calorie Smart and Keto, but my favorite is the Protein Plus. Also, there are more than 60 add-ons to help you stay fueled up and feeling good all day long. So what are you waiting for? Get started today and get after your goals. The great part about Factor, these are 2-minute meals. Fuel up fast with Factor's restaurant-quality meals. They're ready to heat and eat wherever you go. So whether it's pancakes, smoothies, more, you can discover a wide variety of easy options for the entire day, like breakfast, midday bites, and more. And you can be flexible with your schedule with these meals. You can get as much or as little as you need by choosing your meals every week. Plus, you can pause or reschedule your deliveries at any time. Factor is the perfect solution if you're looking for fast, premium options with no cooking required. So you can sign up and save. We've done the math. Factor is less expensive than takeout, and every meal is dietitian approved to be nutritious and delicious. So head to factormeals.com/Illini50 and use code Illini50 to get 50% off. That's code Illini50 at factormeals.com/Illini50 to get 50% off.
All right, let's roll through some of these other questions. Thanks to over the 200 plus on a Monday morning with us, starting off your week. We appreciate you guys. Hit that like button if you're here live on the YouTube channel. If you're listening on the podcast, go follow us and hit the notifications bell on that YouTube page as well. Let's see here. Nate asks, big picture, what will it take for Iowa, Michigan State, et cetera, bubble teams to secure spots in the tournament? I'm looking at this. Lenardi moved Iowa to his 4th team out. I think Iowa has to beat Ohio State, has to be close to a quad one on a neutral site. I don't know if it would be. And then have to beat Illinois for sure. And then probably another one. I think they got to win 3. I think they got to get to the Big Ten championship game to get back into that playing game, probably for Iowa in the NCAA tournament. Michigan State doesn't seem to be on the bubble. I think they deserve to be, Derek. I still can't get over They're a 9 seed for Lunardi right now. It's just they played such top competition, got a couple good wins, but it's just not a team that's passing the eye test for me, though. With Tyson Walker, maybe they can make a little bit of a run. It's just one transfer. Just get one transfer. That team could have been competing maybe in the top 4 of the Big Ten. I just don't understand Izzo's stubbornness there. The team we got to look out for, Ohio State. Like, could they play their way into the bubble with a run to the championship game? I think that's what it would take. But our guy, Brad Evans at thegamingjuice.com, has Ohio State number 2 on his first 4 out here, Derek.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, they're 54th in the net. And unfortunately, that's just unfortunately for Iowa, that's just on the outside of the quad 1 range on a neutral. For them to rise, they'd have to win that game, of course. And I think that's probably the nail in the coffin. I mean, it would be for Iowa if they lose that game. I agree with you. They need to beat Ohio State and then probably beat Illinois, depending on what else happens with automatic bids and how that whole thing works. But I do think that Iowa, that was winning in. They did play well, they still have over the last month almost. They won 4 of their last 6, 2 losses to Illinois.
I was gonna say Illinois, the only team to beat them here recently.
Yeah. But in terms of Ohio State, that's crazy. A team that was left for dead, and Diebler's really got them going, and they have the home win against Purdue. They put it together some nice basketball and beat some people. But yeah, Michigan State. I mean, it's with this. No one will be surprised, right? If Izzo just walks away after this year. I mean,
no,
he is.
I think it's time. I think it's. Tom Izzo's an unbelievable coach, Hall of Famer, all those things, but it just feels like Nick Saban just knew it was his time. Like, kudos to Nick. I mean, he goes to the college football playoff in his final year. He did start to get transfers and all that stuff, but he just realized what I do, the way I do things, I can't do that anymore. And do you want to keep doing that at your age? And to be honest with you, like, he's a legend. Like, he gets to write his way out, but it might be the time to do that, because Michigan State's kind of fallen in the middle of the pack in the Big Ten. And, if you're Michigan State, like, maybe you need some infusion there. So yeah, like, listen, he can decide whether he wants to come back. I think he's earned that. But if he comes back, you got to go to the portal. And you made a good point last night as we were talking about this. 2 of his best players the last 2 years, Joey Hauser and Tyson Walker, are portal guys. Like, they're transfers. So I don't understand why you didn't go get some guys to help this team, because you're relying so much on Jaden Akins and Sissoko and Cooper and Kohler, and these guys just haven't been good enough for them.
No, and I mean, they would have been a totally different team. Like, let's say that instead of Nebraska getting ranked mass, maybe Michigan State does. Just that alone, and Michigan State should have a lot of appeal in the portal, trying to play for Izzo. Of course,
they have plenty of NIL there.
They should. I mean, the support that they have is crazy, and it's a basketball first school too. So to go 10-10 in a bad Big Ten for a team that was preseason top 5 in the country, to have the backcourt pieces that they have. I know that Hogard on the whole didn't have the year that you would have been hoping. Jaden Akins didn't take that next step, but Walker was tremendous, and it is just a total fault and stubbornness and roster building. And but the metrics, crazy as it is for a team that's only won 18 games on the whole this season, the metrics still like them. The net has them 25th. Ken Palm, they're still a top 25 to 30 team. So I don't think they're on paper. They shouldn't be in any danger of missing the tournament, even if they lose again, in Minneapolis. But 18 wins isn't a lot. And again, 10-10 in a bad Big Ten is not very impressive.
And say they lose their first game in the Big Ten tournament. I think they played Minnesota. Like, say they lose that one, they fall to like a 10 seed. I do not want to see them if I'm a 7 seed or a 2 seed. Like, I don't want to deal with Tyson Walker. So I completely acknowledge that. Right. This could be a team that gets to the Sweet 16 just because of the NCAA tournament and the craziness. But
if you have a good front court, though, I'd be all right with it. If I have a good big man and he's going against Sissoko and Cooper and Kohler, like, I'd be a lot more okay with it than we probably thought going in with Michigan State.
Yeah. Fedigator, I see we added a quad 3 loss with Maryland getting beat. Yeah, bad loss to Penn State last night. It's just a bad Maryland team. Like, I love Jameer Young. I had to keep him off my first team because he ended up being, he's not this guy, but he ended up being a good stats, bad team guy. And he had no help around him. Julian Reese was solid, but man, that team was really rough this year. But he says, Fedigator, I think we're a solid 4 seed, not moving from there. And some other people asked us, Derek, what would we have to do to move up to a number 3 seed? I think Illinois needs to get to the Big Ten tournament title game. And I do think we say that game doesn't matter, and I think most of it is set. But if Illinois beat Purdue, if they go into that game against Purdue, I think they're going to have 2 scenarios for Illinois. Like if they win the whole thing and beat that and win that game, a marquee game, I could see them moving up maybe a spot or 2 to getting on that 3 seed line. But they definitely have to get to the Big Ten and title game, and they need help. Like you'd need Duke to fall because Lenardi has them as a third number 4 seed. Our guy Brad Evans at the Gaming Juice has him the number 1 4 seed. But I still think they got to move up a couple spots and need a little bit of help. So that would include Duke falling, Baylor. Like Kentucky feels like they're getting pretty safe to a 3 seed with their wins here recently. I don't see Creighton falling that much. So you're probably rooting for Duke.
Another team in there that just has probably too much quality of win.
Yeah. So you need Kansas maybe to stumble again in the Big Ten. So yeah, I'd be rooting against Kansas and Duke and getting the Big Ten title game. I think that's the best chance. And even then, you got to maybe jump Alabama on some people's lines. So it's going to be difficult. I think it's going to be really difficult for Illinois to move to that 3 seed, which is why that Purdue game was so important.
100%. Yeah. Duke is really the team that I highlight when you look at the fact that they are similar to you and that it's a very shallow ACC. You know, they don't have very many projected teams in the tournament. Duke only has 1 top 20 win in the net, that being Baylor. So them losing against North Carolina was big in terms of keeping that off their resume as far as a win goes. And if they bow out early in the ACC tournament, it could be a situation where there's room to make that jump. With Illinois, I think you want Iowa probably to win because that on paper would be a bona fide quad 1 game. I know if Ohio State beats them, maybe they move into the top 50. Then you just need as many quad 1 opportunities as possible. You don't want upsets on the bottom half in terms of the semifinal because Indiana right now, if you're playing them on a neutral, that's not a quad 1 game, or whoever's playing on a Wednesday working their way in. You want to face Nebraska. You want to beat them. And then to get to Sunday and play Purdue. And if that game doesn't matter, we got a broken system. You can't – while there's still – games left going into the tournament, and you're going to play the number 1 overall seed projected in the big dance, and you beat them on a neutral, that game should matter a lot. You know, The fact that whoever insert whatever name here, if that game happens in January, and let's say it's at Madison Square Garden, you beat the projected number 1 overall seed, like that game matters a lot. So I think that needs to at least have a potential to move the needle for Illinois. Will be enough. Maryland making it a quad 3 loss, taking away a quad 1 win on the road, that does hurt. And just in general, it would be Illinois' only real signature win. So, but if Duke falls, I think that's one potential clear path where Illinois could make that jump.
A few more here. Jeffrey, I wish they would have worked more with Dain and Hawkins all season long, so they have more of a connection. I think that's going to be important in the tourney. Seen that a little bit, Derek. Let's just be honest, though. Dain wasn't really helpful for a long stretch there at the beginning of Big Ten play. Offensively, he was turning it over a little bit. Yes, he can get some buckets, but he gives up some possessions. And then defensively, he was a problem. So kudos to Dain for bouncing back, focusing on those intensity and effort things and making Brad play him. But I think it's good because Coleman has talked about his knee hurting a little bit. I think it is. Brad has said he's got to deal with it, and that's true. But I think that's really helpful to spell Coleman for a couple minutes to help him. But I thought Coleman was still good last night. But to have somebody else you can put in there. And for me, with Dain, it's all about the matchups, right? Like when you get big teams, like Illinois has played a lot of big teams here lately, including Iowa's got 2 bigs that they like to play. It's nice to be able to play that. Like instead of just having one guy in Kofi and then you're small everywhere else, Illinois has got multiple options that Brad can mix and match in that front court. I just don't see Coleman and Dain playing a lot together. And Dain does. We saw Domas try and back somebody down last night, and he's like, Dain, get out of the way. He just condenses a lot of things offensively. But if he's bringing stuff defensively, he certainly can help.
You said it there. Spacing is still something that, as far as them hunting matchups, booty ball, Shannon getting downhill, Dain just clogs the lane. And I think that when he's in the court, there is kind of an urgency or just kind of a mode of wanting to throw it into him on the block. And sometimes that goes well. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes he, like Purdue, he had back-to-back turnovers. He did have a turnover against Iowa, although to his credit, after that was more solid and had a really impressive kind of like spin move dunk, like ferocious dunk that showed the confidence that he has. He's playing with confidence. And
to be honest with you, I think they're better offensively. Like he's better offensively when they don't run through him, when they don't do those post ups, when he's just getting those effort plays and people are dumping it off to him after they collapse on Domask or Shannon. And he's just getting easy looks at the rim, or he's getting offensive rebounds. Like I think that's when he's most effective.
Yeah, because it tends to maybe overcomplicate things when he's trying to make a move off the dribble. But I do like, if you're talking about it, like Coleman's 3-point shooting ability is obviously night and day this year versus previously in his career. So that makes it, if you're just zeroing in on the 4-5 combo and playing Hawkins at the 5 with Dain, or playing him at the 4 with Dain at the 5, that works a lot better than it did last year. But yeah, defensively, if there's a stretch 5, obviously he's not going to get out there and contest all that well. And he can still be exploited some of the drop coverage, although obviously Coleman's had his issues there as well. It just helps you, like you said, matchup wise, giving Coleman a little bit of a break if Coleman gets into foul trouble, and just having somebody that you know is going to be out there for some stretch of time, playing with confidence, playing well, giving you a boost, instead of having a fall off of, oh, we got to rush Coleman back onto the court because you're on a 6-0 run the other way because Dain's on the court and he's getting exploited. So his stepped up performance has definitely been nice to see.
During conference play, I think this stat is huge too. Dain 64% from the free throw line. Ty Rodgers 63% from the free throw line. That helps when those guys can just give you a couple points when they have to go to the free throw line. So yeah, it's good to see him, having those kind of games. All right, Derek, any final thoughts before we get out of here and head back to Champaign?
No, I think that as you circle back again, 14 wins in 3 of the last 4 years is pretty big. Like that's something to appreciate. I was looking through too, if the 4 seed line is where Illinois is ultimately going to get, Bill Self's 3 seasons at Illinois, he was just 4 seed twice. 1 seed obviously in year 1, but Lon Kruger, the best season that he ever had, 4 seed. So it does kind of give you some perspective.
Right.
Of course, what they do from that starting point in the tournament is going to matter more than anything. It's what we're going to talk about all offseason and going to really frame the minds of how fans feel about what Brad Underwood accomplished with this roster. But it is impressive, the consistency that they've built in the regular season. Just when you had to add some real impact pieces in the portals, a great supporting cast around Coleman and TJ, it's worked. So, and then, I think also just kind of me sitting there thinking about having a stud like TJ and going on this run here recently in this window where you've had Io and Kofi and TJ, and for him, we'll see again, like it's kind of that interesting and cloud is kind of hanging over it. Like he really needs to be in the rafters. But of course, if things break a certain way on the legal side, then that would probably prevent that. But we're in postseason play now, and let's tip it up and see where it goes.
Real quickly, Jake asked, what teams do you guys think have the easiest pass to the Big Ten championship game? Anyone other than Purdue who you'd pick to win it? I think it's a 2-team league, Derek. I think it's Purdue and Illinois. Those are the only 2 teams I think I could pick to win this thing. I mean, Nebraska, this is going to mean the world to them. So maybe they just aren't as talented as the Illinois team in 21. That meant the world to them to get that banner. So I think Nebraska is going to be very, very motivated. I think Indiana's playing well, so they're interesting. But I just think guard play against Illinois and Purdue, I just don't see them beating both of those teams. So I would be shocked if it's not Purdue or Illinois winning this thing.
I'm right there with you. I mean, if we see, of course, Indiana would have to pull some upsets to get to Sunday, but I mean, Purdue dump trucked them twice, and I think they would do it again. It would
Talk
be
about
interesting.
Guard play advantages in that game. Jeez.
Yeah, it's crazy. And while Ware and Renew can be a really tough duo in the post, and if Illinois sees them with Khalil Ware in the mix this time, it'll be a much tougher task as far as that goes. But Nebraska, they've been playing really well over the last month or so. They are a different team away from Pinnacle Bank there in Lincoln, so that's another thing that can they play well enough on a neutral to be able to go on that run. I'm with you. It's been a shallow Big Ten. Wisconsin's off the rails, not playing well. Michigan State don't have confidence in what they're doing. So we do see usually a surprising run or two at the Big Ten tournament. But as of right now, I'll probably go chalk and expect 1 versus 2 in the title game.
Yeah, if there were like a surprise team to make a run, like I do look at Illinois' side of the bracket, just because Purdue's a behemoth. I would think it's Ohio State or Iowa or Indiana. Like those are the 2 teams or a couple teams I think are playing pretty well for the most part over the last several games and have the opportunity to make a run. The other thing I would say, I do think it's important for Illinois to continue to go up even on the 4 seed line, being the first or second team, Derek, because looking at Brad Evans's 5 seeds, Auburn and South Carolina are the top 2, Clemson and Washington State are the bottom 2. I think there's a difference there. Like, I think there's a difference in playing some of those teams. So still got important games ahead and helping your resume here.
For sure. Yeah. And it will matter what 1 seed region you're going to be in too. Not that you're going to catch a break, because it seems like Arizona's probably playing their way out. Tennessee, even though they lost at home, might be a 1 seed right now. And then, of course, you got the big 3 of UConn and Houston and who's the other one I'm missing?
Purdue.
So
yeah, you won't be in Purdue's most likely.
Right.
So I would like to avoid Houston and UConn if I could.
Yep.
So
even though I don't think Tennessee's a walk in the park, obviously. So
North Carolina's not a walk in the park if they get the 1 either.
It may not matter as far as that goes. I don't want to play UConn. Although I do like the idea. We've talked about this. I think Joey and I mentioned it after the Wisconsin in that pod. Being in the East region, and how about imagine this: you're at the TD Garden in Boston, you're throwing it up, Illinois and UConn. That and in the Sweet 16. That sounds awesome. That sounds really awesome. So I want to be there for that. Let's do that.
I'd like to go to Boston with you. That'd be a fun time, Derek.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
All right. Thanks to the 200 plus watching on a Monday morning with us on YouTube. Hit that like button on the way out. Hit the notifications bell. Follow us there. Thanks for all you listening to the podcast as well. Follow us wherever you get your podcast. We got plenty more coming up at Illini Inquirer. I got my 7 thoughts for the week out there right now. Player grades. Derek's working on his takeaways right now, and Joey Wagner's got more in the bank right now. So we got plenty coming up at IlliniInquirer.com. Everybody have a great day. Take care of each other. We'll talk to you next time right here on the Illini Inquirer podcast.